Hello, everyone. Let's discuss this novel research question. Now, these novel research questions, we typically see them as either question number 7, question number 8, or question number 9 in our paper 2 examination for AS Psychology. Without any further ado, let's quickly read this question. Remember, reading the content that is provided to us, it's pretty important. If you do not read on this content, there is a possibility that you might miss out on something important, which might consequently lead to you losing a mark, which you wouldn't want. I wouldn't want that either. So to begin with, this says Gavin is testing the hypothesis that people are more likely to drop rubbish on the ground when there's already rubbish on the ground. Try understanding this. Gavin has a hypothesis to test, right? So the hypothesis that he has to test says that people are more likely to drop rubbish on the ground when they already do see rubbish on the ground. He is conducting a field experiment in a quiet street, right? Keep on picking on information that you get from this, right? So he's conducting a field experiment in a quiet street. His independent variable is whether the street already has rubbish on the ground or it does not. So the hypothesis that Gavin is trying to test over here is people are more likely to drop rubbish on the ground when there is already rubbish on the ground. It is a field experiment being conducted in a quiet street. There are two independent variables over here. The first independent variable would be that seeing if people would throw rubbish at the ground or they'd drop rubbish on the ground when there's already rubbish on the ground, or and the second IV over here would be when there's no rubbish on the ground, right? So Gavin's dependent variable over here would be to see if whether people would drop a leaflet given to them by a stooge. So we have a stooge over here. Whether people would drop a leaflet given to them by a stooge on the ground or not. Let's quickly move on to the first question now that you've understood and absorbed the information that you've received over here, right? Now, state the type of hypothesis Gavin is testing. Include a reason for your answer. It's a 2-mark question. The first mark you get is for the type of for stating the type of hypothesis this is, and the second mark you receive for writing down a reason for why you think this is the hypothesis that you've stated is the actual hypothesis that being tested over here. So again, through a question like this, the examiner is trying to test you if your grip on hypothesis is it's tight enough. So taking this ahead, the first mark, it's a directional hypothesis or one-tailed hypothesis. Why a directional hypothesis? Because Gavin is predicting, right? Or he thinks that people are more likely to drop rubbish on the ground when they already see rubbish on the ground. So that makes it a directional hypothesis. As Gavin says, rubbish will make people litter more, not just that it will have an effect on littering. So again, this is how you score a 2-on-2 over there. Moving on to the next question. The next question over here reads, outline one way in which the participants in Gavin's study are being deceived. So of course, there was deception involved over here because there was a stooge who was set the job of the stooge. The job of the stooge over here was to hand over a leaflet to the participants to see if they would drop it as they receive it or they would not drop it as they receive it through two conditions. The first condition, there would be litter on the ground. The second condition, there would be no litter on the ground. So outline one way in which the participant is in Gavin's study are being deceived. This is a 1-mark question. It would be very simple. We've been asked to outline. Do not miss on the command word. You could write anything. For instance, you write, they do not know that they're in an experiment or study that they're participating in. So that would be an example of deception. Alternatively, you could write the first that we have over here, they're given a leaflet as part of an experiment, or the second one that says they do not know that they're being observed, right? Any, or you could write, alternatively, you could write anything else as well, anything that works, keeping in mind Gavin's situation. Taking this ahead, explain one reason why Gavin chose to conduct a field experiment rather than a laboratory experiment. Let's take this opportunity and quickly revise the difference between a lab experiment and a field experiment. So for a lab experiments are referred to as lab experiments because they are conducted in an artificial environment, in an artificial situation. Of course, if the situation is artificial, you as a researcher would be able to control the situation better. And the better you're able to control the situation, the more chances there are that you'd be able to keep your research procedures standardized. The more chances there are of you being able to keep your research procedures standardized, the more chances there would be that you would be able to replicate or redo the research in exactly the same manner, which again increases the chances of your research reliability being higher, right? It works like a chain. A lab experiment means there'd be tighter controls would lead to better standardization. Better standardization leads to better chance of replication. Better chance of replication lead to better chances of reliability. So this is a 3-mark question. Now, a typical mistake that many students make over here is, even when the examiner has very clearly specified that you need to explain one reason, students, I've seen many students, more than they should be. I've seen many students using more than one reason. That by no mean would give you an extra mark. It would not, right? So if you've been asked to give one reason, you give one reason, right? Now, it is always better that we learn how we could score a 3-on-3, or how we could score full marks in a question where we've been asked to explain one reason, right? Or to give one reason. Now, explain one reason, not give, explain. Yeah. So explain one reason why Gavin chose to conduct a field experiment rather than a laboratory experiment. Why is this a field experiment? This is a field experiment because this experiment, oh, it says it's a field experiment and it was being conducted in a quiet street. Taking this ahead, you get the first mark. So see, this is a 3-mark question, right? You get the first mark for providing the reason. You've been asked for a reason. The second mark for providing detail on the reason that you've provided. And the third mark for linking it up with Gavin, right? It's as simple as it could be, right? Learn it instead of trying to bluff the examiner by using more than one reasons. That has never helped before. It wouldn't, of course. We learn what it would take for us to know to be able to get a full mark. So taking this ahead, if I may use this example, this says participants are likely, they're likely to be unaware that they're in a study, because it's a field experiment, right? So field experiment always has lesser chances of the participants finding out that they're a part of a research, because there is lesser control over extraneous variables. Of course, lesser controls, lesser chance of standardization, lesser chance of replication, and consequently lesser chance of reliability being high. So participants, they are likely to be unaware that they're in a study, the first mark. If they're not aware that they're part of a study, there would be lesser chances of the research being affected by demand characteristics. If there are lesser chance of there being demand characteristics, that means so participants would not avoid littering because they knew they're being watched. Of course, when you know you're being watched, when you know you're being observed, you would not want to, everyone wants to leave a good impression of them, of themselves on others, right? So you might not do that if you know you're being observed. Now, I'd again like to take this opportunity of helping you revise what demand characteristics are. Demand characteristics, or in other words, when the participants find out that they're a part of a research that might lead to them altering their behavior, right? Now, pick up cues from here. The word is demand characteristics, right? Or in other words, a participant in a particular research, or participants in a particular research, them trying to meet the requirement of that research, or them trying to meet the them trying to meet the demand of the research, right? So that's where the word demand characteristics comes from, right? Now, if participants do not know they're a part of a research, they wouldn't know they're being observed, and then they'd be behaving in the natural manner. So how do we score a 3-on-3? You write this, then you clarify that there would be fewer demand characteristics, which would mean that they might not avoid littering, right? If they plan to do so. Taking this ahead, moving on to the last question over here that says, explain one disadvantage of using a field experiment in Gavin's study. Again, they're asking you to explain. This is a 2-mark question. You get the first mark by writing down the disadvantage for a field experiment. You get the second mark by connecting it or linking it to Gavin's research. So the likely answer would be, yeah, a disadvantage of using a field experiment. The answer over here would be, they're likely to be fewer controls. So littering behavior may vary because of other factors as well. There are other factors because of which individuals might litter the ground as well. And it might not just be because there's more litter on the ground. Probably it's because it has got something to do with them having less time at that particular moment, right? You're rushing somewhere in the middle of the street, someone hands over a leaflet to you, you might just throw it away. You're stressed, you're not having the best of day, and you could be habitual, right? So there could be many other factors as well. So yeah, this is how you score a 2-on-2 over here. You get the first mark by explaining the disadvantage, the second mark by linking it with the study that was conducted by Gavin. Now, I hope this has been helpful. Thank you.